The AUKUS nuclear submarine pact, unveiled by the United States, Australia and Britain, will conceivably alter the balance of military power in the Indo-Pacific.
Well, Australia will initially get nuclear-powered subs from America, but will eventually build its own in a joint program with Britain using US and British technology.
Dubbed an illegal nuclear proliferation by Indo-Pacific rival China, the AUKUS deal has set off alarm bells in a number of Asian nations. But as Australian Foreign Minister Penny Wong told CNA, the plan does not include attaining nuclear weapons, but an enhanced naval capability to help stabilise the region.
We don't seek to acquire this capability to do anything other than to seek to ensure a strategic equilibrium. We seek to acquire this capability in order to help keep the peace. We want a peaceful, stable, prosperous region, as Singapore, as Malaysia, as Indonesia does, and we want a region that is respectful of sovereignty.
We want to dig deeper into the ramifications of the AUKUS pact, which has an ultimate price tag of up to $245 billion over 30 years. Our correspondents are standing by in Beijing, Washington, D.C. and in Sydney, Australia. Well, let's begin in D.C., where there appears to be a bipartisan consensus, at least about the perception of risk that China poses in the Indo-Pacific. Jagruti David joins us live now from Washington, D.C. Jagruti, on the scale of U.S. strategic military alliances, how does this AUKUS submarine deal rank, and how will the president explain it to Xi Jinping when the two of them eventually meet?
Well, this is not the only security and defence agreement, Dawn, that the United States has in the region. If you look at the Five Eyes security alliance, that's with New Zealand and Canada. And if you look at the Quad, that's with Japan and Australia and India and the United States, you know, these are many collaborations that the United States is involved in the Indo-Pacific. But it's clear that this is an important one because, you know, the United States was willing to risk the wrath and the ire, the displeasure of another close ally, France. If you remember in 2021, when the AUKUS alliance was first announced, it pretty much involved Australia pulling out of a nuclear submarine deal that it had with France, which then later recalled its ambassadors temporarily from Washington and Canberra. So this is clearly important. Also, it must be remembered that this is very rare for the United States to be sharing its technology like this with another country. One of the last few times it happened was this mutual defence agreement in 1958, that when it was struck with the United Kingdom, where the both countries agreed to share nuclear information and technology. So I think in the grand scheme of things, this is clearly important. All the countries involved having expressed an interest in tilting towards the Indo-Pacific and expressed an interest in countering the rise of China in the region. As to how China will react if and when President Biden speaks to Xi Jinping about this, I mean, it's clear we've seen that China believes that this is a violation of nuclear non-proliferation treaties. They're not very happy about it. As you heard from Penny Wong there, as we heard from Joe Biden, they are going to insist, the AUKUS alliance, that this is a purely defensive alliance, that this is to promote peace and stability in the Indo-Pacific. Whether Beijing or indeed any other regional nations are going to buy this is another thing, with concerns that this alliance could spark the rise of an arms race in the region.
Jagruti, thank you. Jagruti Davi there reporting live for us from Washington, D.C.
And for China's response to the AUKUS deal, let's bring in our correspondent Olivia Seong live from Beijing. Olivia, now China seems to be taking this high moral ground, you know, questioning the three Western countries' regard for international communities. So what exactly is Beijing's position, and does it have a leg to stand on, even given its increase in military spending?
Well, Telly, Beijing clearly angered by this move. It has spoken out many times against this AUKUS alliance in the past, which it views as a part of a wider strategy of the United States to try and contain it. This time round, we are hearing from China's foreign ministry raising its strong opposition to the submarine program. It says that the move demonstrated a clear, typical Cold War mentality, which it says stimulates an arms race and undermines peace and stability in the region, even as the trio of countries has sought to say that this is about nuclear-powered submarines and not about acquiring nuclear weapons. Beijing not buying any of it, instead saying that the move disregards the concerns of the international community and poses a risk for nuclear proliferation, also saying that the move is in breach of a treaty of non-proliferation. And this is the warning from China's foreign ministry today.
美英澳发布的最新联合声明表明，三国为了一己地缘政治私利，完全无视国际社会关切，在错误和危险的道路上越走越远。
Well, the move also puts into question a potential call between U.S. President Joe Biden and his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping. Mr. Biden saying that he could speak with the Chinese leader soon, but China's foreign ministry not confirming any of this, only saying that both sides maintain necessary communication. But the spokesperson added that the value of communication is in managing differences and enhancing understanding, calling the U.S. to show sincerity and to meet China halfway, as we've seen tensions between these two superpowers continue to rise over the last few weeks. Now, previously we had heard U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan say that this potential call between the two leaders could take place after China's parliamentary meetings, which ended on Monday. But we have to remember that during those meetings where Mr. Xi was granted an unprecedented third term as China's president, he also made the call during the closing of the meetings for China to boost its national security and for its military to build a great wall of steel to protect China's national interests, as we've also seen China announce an increase in its military spending for this year by 7.2%, which is its highest increase in 4 years. This, as we had also seen President Xi hitting out at the U.S. in rare direct criticism, accusing the U.S. of trying to contain China. So clearly, China not backing down, and observers saying that it looks like these bilateral tensions are not going to ease up anytime soon.
Thanks for that. Olivia Seong reporting live in Beijing.
Well, now to the real protagonist in this story, Australia. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese calls this deal the biggest single military investment in the country's history, meant to improve its own defence and military capabilities. But the agreement has worried some of Australia's largest regional allies. Both Indonesia and Malaysia have questioned whether it could intensify a nuclear arms race in the Asia-Pacific. Tensions are also rising in the Pacific region, scarred from atomic testing in the 1950s and 60s.
We've made more than 60 calls to regional and world leaders within the Pacific, within ASEAN, within our Five Eyes partners. I'll let those countries speak for themselves, but I am very grateful for the response that we have received.
But fears still remain over what could happen when Australia does begin manufacturing these vessels. Let's get to Danielle Robertson, who joins us live now from Sydney for more on this. Danielle, the country has a lot of work to do to convince its neighbours that AUKUS is not going to lead to an arms race in this region. How is it proposing to do that?
Yeah, that's right. Well, hours after this AUKUS deal was announced, China's foreign ministry did criticise the deal and say it does threaten stability and peace in the region, and they said it breached the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. Now, already Australian authorities have come out and said that they are committed still to that treaty and that Australia is not trying to acquire nuclear weapons. Authorities here say they are trying to acquire nuclear-powered, not nuclear-armed submarines. Now, Australia's Prime Minister and the Foreign Minister Penny Wong reiterated that other countries have acquired nuclear-powered submarines that are allowed under the deal, and the Foreign Minister reiterated that Australia's motivation is peace. So they've quickly come out to try and reassure some of Australia's neighbours that they do not want to escalate tensions in the region. They do not want an arms race. Of course, though, there are concerns. They are nervous. Our neighbours are nervous, and rightly so, as Australia's Prime Minister, as you said, announced this as the biggest investment in Australia's defence capabilities in history. And of course, this fleet is going to allow Australia to travel further away from home with less risk. These nuclear submarines are harder to detect than the conventional ones, meaning they can travel further away from the home base for longer.
Thanks, Danielle, for that. Danielle Robertson there reporting live from Sydney. We do apologise for the quality of the audio on that report. Russia, meantime, has also pushed back against AUKUS. Not unexpectedly, though, we'll have a live report from Moscow. That's later in the show.